So just a reminder about our discussions. So first of all, our discussions have an initial post that's due on Wednesday every week, and that initial post needs to be at least 150 words. The initial post also has to have at least one reference and one in-text citation. And then you've got 2 replies that you're going to add that are at least 50 words each. So I thought we would spend some time looking at the discussion prompt for this week. So here's the first prompt. I'll give you a minute to read through it. So this is a scenario, a good place to start. If you are being asked to research any topic, in this case, you're researching the outcomes of people who have been in vehicle accidents. You first have to take a self-assessment to understand if you're going to have any bias towards this particular situation. Now, you may not actually have any of these things that you list out, but they are always good. You're thinking about any bias anyone could have. So let's just bring over I'm going to bring over a Word document, and we'll kind of make notes here as far as what biases we could have. And let me make this a little bit bigger. So bias you could have based on personal experience. So let's see, we wanted any preconceived ideas or bias that you may have about people in vehicle accidents. Well, something that I think about is if I had a family member who had been in a vehicle accident, then I'm going to have the bias, right? Can you think of other situations where you might have bias in this particular situation? If you have a family member who's been in an accident? Well, what about if you had been someone who maybe you were a first responder, okay? You had seen quite a few accidents, right? You're going to have some bias, right? So if you're a first responder, you might have some bias. Maybe you don't work as a police or a paramedic, but maybe you're a volunteer fireman, right? And you get called out to some of these vehicle accidents. I think those are some scenarios where we could see some bias show up. Let's try to think of one more. That way we've got 3 that we can build our discussion post off of. So family member who has been in an accident, a first responder who has seen a lot of accidents. Maybe you yourself have been in a vehicle accident before. I think there's some good ideas there for the bias that could potentially be in this. Now remember, you're not saying that you actually have any of these biases. You're just brainstorming any biases that might be in place. Okay, so now that we've brainstormed the types of bias that could be there, let's look at the next sentence. It says, how would you begin your research and structure it to help remove these ideas from impacting your outcomes? How would you begin your research and structure it to remove these ideas from impacting? So let's see, how would we begin? Well, one thing I like to think about when I do research is I want to focus less on the stories and more on the numbers. When I start to look at the stories, then I get involved in the emotions and the feelings of the data as opposed to the actual numerical values. So let's focus on, oops, making just my notes here, focus on the data. Um, and I'm going to put numbers here instead of the stories. See, a lot of times the news and the media are giving us a lot of story, okay? And they're doing that in order to use our emotions to move us to action of some sort, whether that's to watch their newscast more often or it's to boost their ratings or whatever. They're trying to move us to action by our feelings. And so a lot of times the media gives us feelings when really we need data. So when we do our research, I'm going to focus on the numbers of the data as opposed to the stories. That's going to help me to focus on, it's going to have to minimize my bias. And I'm not sure we actually can eliminate our bias, but we're going to do our best to minimize it. Okay, let's see if we can come up with one more way that we can help our research to minimize our bias. Okay, I think another piece here is for us to use an accountability. Use accountability. So what that looks like sometimes is when we do our research, we then put our research out there for someone else to read. So I've done my preliminary data analysis. I'm trying to figure out what it is I need to do. And I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to remove the stories, focus on the data. But at the end of the day, then I need to put my, um, excuse me, let's do this. Okay, I need to put my ideas out there for someone else to read and let me know what it is they actually think about the data. You know, did I only look at the vehicles where the patients did not cover, or did I focus on the ones where um, the accident where the person who hit another car, they got off scot-free? And did I do that with my bias in mind? So by using accountability, you're getting another set of fresh eyes on your research, and that's always going to help you to eliminate some of your bias. All right, so we've got the makings of a really good discussion post. I've got 3 types of bias that I can talk about. I've got 2 things I can do in my research to help eliminate or minimize my bias. We talked about that. It looks like the only thing I have left is to do a little bit of research to find my reference. Okay. Now, you and I, there in just about 10 minutes, were able to brainstorm, come up with some great ideas to include in our first discussion post for this week. So use these. You're welcome to use any of them that we brainstormed together. Put them together with your reference. I definitely can go and look at some of the journals. I tended to just do a Google, you could do a Google Scholar or you could do a Google search to find some articles maybe about how to minimize bias in research. And that gave me quite a few. Here's some that gives you some really good ideas. I like this one, and I definitely could use this. That's our accountability one, right? Okay, you're welcome to use this site if you'd like. Um, that's what I searched. I searched how to minimize bias in research. So I'm going to put that on my brainstorm sheet. And you'll find an article that you can then use in your writing of discussion 1. So all of this together, you know, you could definitely start out your piece with there is always bias in different forms of research. Our job is to try to minimize that bias. For this scenario, the types of let's take out types of bias may include. And then I'm going to let you finish with the three types of bias that we talked about. I might add a sentence of describing with each one of these. And then once you add your different types of bias, then you can focus on the ways that I can try to minimize my bias are, and then you can include the steps we talked about for our research. And again, I probably would add a sentence or two with each one of them. And then use your reference. I liked the reference we found to talk about the accountability piece. So I think that gives you a good starting place for this first discussion board.